Hi there, this is my video, journal number 1, where I'll describe the characteristics of ASD that I observed thus far and explain what I have learned in the course that has helped me better identify the different characteristics in individuals with ASD. For my observations, I've been observing 2 students, one with autism in our mild to moderate program. This student is fully included in all his general education classes and then receives specialized academic services in the form of push-in to his ELA and math class and pull-out in small group during his elective time where he receives help with his IEP goals. I will refer to him as student A when I'm describing my observations. The other student that I am observing is a student in our specialized teaching program, which we call STP at our school, which supports students with moderate to severe needs. He spends the majority of his time in that classroom with a small group of students who also have autism, and he goes to general education classrooms for his electives like art and PE. And when he does go to those general education classrooms, he's usually accompanied by a paraeducator or an education specialist. For one of the observations that I did, and one behavior in particular that I saw in multiple settings with student A was the rocking forward and back in his desk. I observed this in his advisory in the morning. I observed it when his math teacher was giving direct instruction, and I also observed it when he was taking a test in his ELA class. And it seems to happen a lot of times when it's not a preferred activity that they are doing in class. As a result of the learning from this class, I know that this is a stimming type behavior that has to do with his sensory processing. I feel like through this class I've learned to look beyond the behavior and seeing the source behind it. As Beal mentioned in her video that we watched this week, this is the student's way of dealing with the sensory input around him. And a way for me to learn more about this is to take a detailed journal of when and why it's happening, so that I can learn more and assist the student in, finding that balance and that sensory diet that Beal mentions. Another behavior that I observed with student A also had to do with sensory processing. This happened in his advisory class in his first period. He happened to come to school without a mask, and so his homeroom teacher had a disposable mask and gave it to him and asked him to put it on, and he ended up ripping it into little pieces. And then I came in as the teacher was giving him another disposable mask, and again he ripped it up and put his head down on the desk. The teacher mentioned that his behavior was now becoming defiant, so this action of ripping up his mask was being seen as defiant behavior. The student and I left the classroom to take a break. He was able to get up and come with me. And in the past, lack of food or lack of sleep can cause this type of putting a head down or ripping things for this student. So after various questions about did he eat breakfast or did he get enough sleep the past night, we got to the point of discovery that he didn't like the feel of the disposable mask on his face. He felt like he couldn't breathe through it. It felt uncomfortable for him, and it bothered him. So that's why he was ripping it up. And he didn't have the words to explain that to his teacher. So his actions were to rip it up and put his head down. So we were able to find a soft cloth mask that fit his face better, and the material didn't bother him, and he was able to return to class without any more issues. And as a result, I made sure to communicate this with teachers, and we put spare masks in his first period class just in case he ever forgot one again. But this also, I feel like learning from this class has also informed me to look at other sensory issues, not just the normal like noise or things like that, but also to think of clothing or even masks that they're putting on their face that could cause some sort of issue or for the students. So that was another behavior that I observed that had to do with the sensory processing for this student. Another observation that I did was observing student B in art class. I observed various characteristics of autism spectrum disorder during this observation. For the first part of class, the student was just kind of staring off into space. The paraeducator who accompanies him gave him a couple redirections to focus on the teacher who was giving instructions at the time. The class was a little noisy, and so I think he was just kind of not focusing on anything in particular the teacher directing, but kind of all around. During the direct instruction where the teacher was modeling the art project that they were going to do on the board, he was rocking back and forth in his chair, and he was also finger tapping the bottom of his chair and his leg. So again, some of that self-stimulating, repetitive behavior that I observed. When it came time to drawing, the teacher was drawing. He was engaged in the activity, and it appeared that he was following along and drawing stuff on his paper. When I did look at his paper, I did observe poor handwriting and spacing of the figures on his paper. And this kind of fits with some of the things I've read about motor impairments that can be a characteristic of autism spectrum disorder. Taking this class has definitely helped me identify the characteristics of ASD. The sensory impairment video and fact sheet this week definitely opened my eyes to the expansiveness of the sensory system and reminded me not to assume that my students are processing all the sensory input the same way I am. This was really evident with the mask issue that I observed with student A. Like, while the material doesn't bother most people, we just assumed that something else was going on. It was a big issue for him, and he wasn't able to communicate that with us. It had to come through me asking questions and eventually asking if, was it the mask that was bothering you? I also learned through reading an article last week for the annotated bibliography that sleep disorders can affect many students with ASD. And that's not something I had learned before. And one thing in the past, student A has often complained about being tired and not sleeping well, and I never knew that there was that connection. So I feel like through all the readings that we've done and the discussion posts, I'm just learning about the uniqueness of ASD and the various characteristics, and now I'm seeing them being observed in the students that I'm watching and following and teaching. I'm looking forward to more observations and continued opportunities for learning more about ASD in general and about my students who have ASD and how to best support them and what interventions will be best in this journey. So, thanks.